As an instructor, I've learned never to assume anything, that it's not always obvious to everybody the way things are supposed to work. So what we've done so far is we have put bills into the system that are due for us to pay, our accounts payable, but we haven't actually paid them yet. That's going to be our next and final step. In order to pay the bills, we're going to go to Vendors, and shortly down from the top, we will go ahead and pay our bills. All of the bills that have been entered, no matter how they were entered, are going to show up in this particular window. We need to select the bills that need to be paid. Depending on how your particular business works, you may use a variety of different things here. You can choose only to pay bills that are due on or before a certain date. There are some companies who don't pay anything early. If something's not due for 30 days, they're not going to pay it for 30 days, whether they have the money or not. A lot of that has to do with cash flow. But regardless, whatever your policy is, you have the option to only show bills that are due on or before a certain date, or you can show all bills. You also can sort bills by due date, which might be helpful if you don't have enough money to pay everything. Maybe you want to see the ones that are most urgent first. What we're left with are actually 3 different bills. We have one for total training for CBTs, we have one for UCERT for certification vouchers, and one to Smiles Days for some flowers that we ordered. Now it's simply a matter of going through and processing which ones you want to pay. One way to do that is to simply place a check mark. So I need to pay off those flowers. Notice that as soon as I do that, it automatically calculates that $54 should be paid in the right-hand column. The next thing is to do UCERT. Likewise, $425. Now, I've been having not some issues with total training, but we have some things that are kind of in process back and forth. We had a couple of DVDs that were damaged in shipping, so we need to get that figured out. So I'm going to put a check mark from total training, but I don't want to pay them in full. You'll see that in the middle, I do have options if they were given to me. If my vendors give me a discount, for example, for paying within 10 or 15 days, we will see that information here and it will be automatically calculated. Then you can use those credits or those discounts. On the far right hand, though, if you just don't want to pay a bill in full, you have that option. I'll click for the amount to pay for total training. I'll erase part of it. And instead of $1,250, I'm going to pay $950. Then I'll just use my down arrow to move off of it. What we can see now at the bottom is the total amount that I'm going to pay, $1,429. I can make sure that I have enough of that in my bank account to pay for it. And I can move over to the bottom left-hand side of the screen. If I wanted to clear out all of those choices, I could use the Clear Selections button. I also have some information down at the bottom for the currently selected vendor. So it happens to be UCERT. It gives me a reference number if there's one there, what the terms are, if there's a suggested discount, if we have credits, and of course there are buttons that let us either set discounts and credits or go to the bill itself. Down at the very bottom of the screen, I get to talk about the payment. What date do I want to put on the payment? What method do I want to use to pay? If I'm using checks, do I want those to be printed? Or do I want to assign a check number? Now the reason there are 2 options here and it's an OR option is this. If I'm going to let the computer automatically assign a check number, then I'd simply use the to be printed option. Then it will just pick the next consecutive number from the last check I printed and it will continue on. That's perfect. If I assign the check number, and let me go ahead and click that, then I have the option to put in the number that I want to start with. That would be for an account where maybe I was actually at the places and I already wrote the check. What I'm doing here is just putting into QuickBooks that it's been paid. So basically, to be printed is the all electronic method. Assigned check number is the one where we're doing handwritten checks, but we're using electronic accounting methods. Hopefully that's not too confusing for you. I'm actually going to go ahead and print them out, so I will do that. Need to pick the account from which the checks are going to be written. That's business checking, which is our default. And then I click on the very bottom right, Pay Selected Bills. This shows me a payment summary, which is always good, just to make sure you've done exactly what you thought you were going to. It shows me the payment date, the account it's coming from, the payment method, and payments have successfully been recorded for 3 of 3 bills, and of course it lists each of those, the date due, the vendor, and the amount paid. Then I have an option. I can go back and pay more bills, or I can just be done, or if it's time to go ahead and do a check run, or I want to print the checks right now, I can click Print Checks. I'm going to go ahead and do that from this dialog, but know that you could also go to File, Print Forms, Checks to get the exact same result. Anytime you use the Print Forms dialog, it's going to give you something like this. It's going to ask you what account or anything else that's appropriate. In this case, we're writing checks, so we need to know which account we want to write checks on. It also asks me for the first check number. Since this is the first check I've written out of this version of QuickBooks, it starts at 1. That probably isn't the number you want to start with, as we've discussed before, so I'll just make it 1001. And from this point forward, QuickBooks will consecutively number all of the checks. So these 3 checks will be 1001, 1002, 1003. The next time I write a check, it will start with 1004. That makes it very easy. Down below, I get to see all of the checks that it's going to write, and if for some reason I don't want it to write one of these checks at the current moment, I can simply deselect it by taking off the check mark. Then all I need to do is click OK. And because it is printing something, it brings up your standard print dialog box. Here you would pick the printer, you would choose what type of checks you had, and this is really an important decision because you will be using pre-printed checks. Sometimes in QuickBooks we talk about printing on blank paper. Well, that's obviously not available for checks because you have to have routing numbers and the microline codes and all of those types of things. So you need to make sure that you purchase some type of check stock that is compatible with QuickBooks. Of course, you can buy that from Intuit. There are also a lot of other third-party providers. What you will basically have is a choice between a voucher, where you have the check on the top and the voucher information below, a standard, which is actually 3 checks up, or wallet-sized checks. I'll just give you a hint. Wallet-sized checks are typically not considered to be business checks. So if you're using this, you're probably a sole proprietor and using those types of stock, which is okay. But just so you know, it's a little bit more professional to use the voucher or the standard checks. It's not really that expensive to buy check stock, and there's even some software that will let you print your own checks. But that's usually a 2-step process. One piece of software prints the check itself, and then QuickBooks will fill in the check. QuickBooks does not have the capability to print the microlines and account codes and those types of things for the check itself at the same time it's paying the bill. When I clicked on Wallet Checks, it gave me this little error message. I'm going to say thank you for sharing. I'll go back to a voucher check, and normally I would go ahead and click Print to finish the process. Since you can't see it actually print out, I'm going to go ahead and say Cancel for now. And because I canceled, these all stay as outstanding checks. I can continue to write checks just like I continue to make invoices and statements and things like that, and they all show up in the queue to be printed until I actually print them out. Then QuickBooks empties the queue and moves from that point forward. I'll do Cancel one more time and bring us back to our favorite and now very comfortable home screen.